Hey guys, Sharpend here. In this video I'm going to show you how to make the main bass from Lady Gaga's latest single, Stupid Love. It sounds something like this. So this video is based on a request that I got recently to make the main bass from Lady Gaga's new single, Stupid Love. It sounds like this. And while I really didn't like the song too much composition-wise, it has a lot of great production techniques. It's really loud and it makes use of very simple sounds in a really clever way. So we're going to see that in the bass that we're making. So here's the patch that I've made for it. Without a lot of effects, it sounds like this, which is really far away from that bass, but thanks to a lot of additional effects we can get to something really close. So the main concept here is using a saw wave that has a lot of voices. It sounds like this, and the detune isn't too noticeable. We want it to be just in the background. And we're using a low-pass filter here to modulate the cutoff to open and close really fast using this LFO. So this LFO has no BPM on its setting, it's on 2.1 Hertz, and it's closing pretty fast the cutoff, so that way we get sort of like a plucky attack. And then the main thing that gives this sound its unique timbre is an additional waveform. It should be a waveform of like bass growls and something that you would use to create like Skrillex growls and virtual riot type basses. Something that has a lot of different sounds that sound sort of like growl basses. So this one also has 16 voices. The detune is also fairly small, and it's also being sent to our filter. But the difference in this one is that we're modulating the wavetable position and FM from A. We're modulating the wavetable position right here using chaos oscillator, which means that it's constantly moving all of the time. So that way we get slightly different formats to each bass hit, which allows us to make it sound like it's flanging or phasing over time. And as for the FM from A, which is the first oscillator, it's being changed by note on random right here. And this means that every time a new note plays, it's also going to increase the amount of FM that this wavetable gets from our first oscillator. So that way we get some slight variation in our wavetable sound, which makes it sound as if it's phasing or flanging over time. Which is what is happening in the original sound. So altogether we got this so far. And then we're adding some white noise. And as for the white noise, we're modulating the pitch by note on random as well. So that way we get slightly different noise hits as well. And this one is also being sent to the noise to the filter. And the level isn't too high, it's just there to be barely noticeable. And without the filter it would sound like this. So that's why we're using it to control it and make it sound a lot more plucky. And as for the volume envelope, which is envelope number 1, we have some slight attacks so that it doesn't sound way too clicky. No sustain, and the decay is at around 350 ms. And make sure that the shape isn't too curved. It should be something like this. Just see what sounds right for you. And then we're adding a sub oscillator which goes directly out so that it doesn't get affected by all of the effects that we're adding later. I've used the triangle waves since saw waves or square waves sound way too obnoxious, and sine waves are barely noticeable. So this is just there to give it some extra weight to our bass. And altogether so far we have this sound, which is nice, but it's not as powerful as the original bass, so that's why we're adding some effects. So we're adding some phaser. It's mixed at around like 35%. The depth is below 50%, and I suggest that you just mess with the frequency knob until you find something that sounds right to you. And that is pretty much it for it. It just adds some additional movement to our bass. Then we're adding a compressor, which is on multiband mode, which is just like the OTT plugin. So already we're getting a really powerful sound thanks to that compressor. So now we're adding two final effects. We're adding some distortion. Notice that the distortion is the drive is at 50%, and we're increasing it using another LFO. So this one stays up most of the time and decays fairly fast near the end. And this basically increases the drive just for the attack part of our plug, so that we get something that's bigger and a bit more sharp. Then we're adding another filter, since the distortion and the compressor have added, in my opinion, way too much sustain to our sound, and we want it to be plucky and fast, to have a fast decay. So that's why we're adding another filter, a low pass filter that I'm controlling using the same LFO. Notice how it removes some of the sustain that our sound had. So that is it for Serum, and now we're adding some additional effects. So we're adding another OTT. So this one is mixed at 30%. We're reducing the input gain by a lot, increasing the output gain by almost the same amount. And we're reducing the lows by a bit and increasing the highs by a tiny bit to give it that additional high-end click. So as you can hear, this adds some nice power to our sound. And I'm adding another phaser plugin, just a tiny bit. It's mixed at 28% to add some more movement. And notice that at the end of every bar, I'm adding a tiny bit of an increase in the mix amount of our phaser to get some additional nice movement. I've just noticed that in certain parts in the original track, in the final beat, they add a tiny bit of more phasing. So this is there to replicate it. And I've also added some camel crusher on one of the more subtle settings, the British clean one. So this is there just to make it more powerful, more bassy, just overall more compressed and much stronger in my opinion. So altogether, without these effects, it sounded like this. And with the effect, it sounds like this, which is far more powerful and more reminiscent of the powerful sounds in the original song's production. And one final thing I've noticed is that they add some sidechain to give it some movement. And I've decided to do it by envelope. They probably just routed the kick to the bass sound so that every time the kick hits, the bass drops in volume. But I've decided to make one on my own, and notice that I've made this shape. I just find that it retains a tiny bit of the pluck's original initial attack. And that sounds, in my opinion, much better than a sidechain envelope that starts like this. So let's hear it. As you can hear, we have that tiny click at the beginning instead of this, which is way less clicky and plucky. So altogether, you get this sound. And that is pretty much it. If you found this tutorial helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below what subject do you want me to cover up next time.